realized that we could create a cabinet that would be watchdogging. And in fact, shadow cabinets it's like an institution that's used in many democracies around the world. They create a shadow cabinet after an election in order to continue the opposition voice. In this country, there is no opposition party. Democrats and Republicans basically agree on 90% of their agenda, except, on the sort of at the margins of social policy. And they make a very big deal out of that. But, the differences on women's reproductive rights, which is important, on voting rights, which is important. But that's not going to save your job. It's not going to save the climate. It's not going to stop the ripoff from the banks. It's not going to stop this predatory Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's not going to stop the foreclosures, which continue to throw millions of families out of their homes. We need a green sheriff to do that. So, we realized we could keep this going. And it's great because their fear machine really revs up during an election. It's constantly scaring people and trying to convince you that you've got to vote for the lesser evil when the differences between them are really window dressing. But they're very focused on fear campaigning during an election. After an election, the fear machine kind of, it's not happening. So you actually get to have a real conversation about what our lives look like and about the power that we actually have to stand up and fight back and take back our future. So it's been incredibly exciting. Go to greenshadowcabinet.us when you're really outraged at what is coming down from Democrats and Republicans, like this expanding war, the free trade agreements, and the endless foreclosures. The jobs recovery, which is not a recovery. These are low-wage and insecure jobs. We have more people than ever on food stamps, even while the economy is supposed to have been recovering. There are almost 50 million Americans now who need food assistance in order to get through the day. So that recovery ain't happening. The Department of Labor actually predicts that 9 out of 10 jobs being created over the next 10 years are low-wage, insecure jobs that do not require a college degree. They don't pay college wages. So this is the kind of economy that they have engineered us into, and that the Trans-Pacific Partnership, as another one of these free trade agreements, is just going to keep pushing us towards. So corporate America and the two parties that represent it are very happy with the economy. Corporate profits have never been better. Wall Street and the stock market has never been higher. They like this just fine. So they have stayed the course. It's up to us to change the course and take our future back. So I'm going to focus in here a little bit on two of these crises because they're kind of central, and share with you how they are unbelievably fixable in a way that is just a win-win across the board. So we're going to focus in on the unemployment crisis and declining wages, and also on the climate crisis. And we'll talk a little bit about food security and the democracy crisis too. So this is just some of the little factoids I mentioned before. I mentioned some of these, about the economic crisis. Actually, I guess I didn't mention these. One out of every 2 people, according to the most recent census, the U.S. Census Bureau, 1 out of every 2 Americans are in poverty or low income and heading for poverty. That is not okay. 36 million students are in debt. That's students or recent graduates. Half of all college graduates are working in jobs that do not pay college wages, which means you can't repay those loans. So these are indentured servants. This is where the real power for change comes from. It's what the driver was in Tahrir Square and in all the democracy revolutions in the Middle East. It's an ongoing battle, but it is well underway, and it's being driven largely by young people who recognize they don't have a future in the system as it exists. The jobs I mentioned before, 1 out of every 3 African-American young men is either in jail, on probation, or on parole. You know, this is absolutely unacceptable. We need to stop that school-to-prison pipeline and actually create jobs in our community, which is going to fix this. And here's a little picture to just take home with you because it makes so crystal clear. I thought I was, fairly well informed, but it wasn't until a few years ago that I actually understood what the American economy looks like. Imagine you have 100 people in a room, and that represents the American population. And you have 100 loaves of bread, and that represents all our wealth and resources. The richest person in the room gets 50 loaves of bread, and the 50 poorest people in the room are sharing one loaf of bread. We hear a lot about how obscenely rich the 1% is, but we don't hear very much about how obscenely, immorally poor we have made half of the American population, sharing one loaf of bread. So this is a revolution waiting to happen. And what are they doing about it? More free trade agreements, these tiered wage programs. This is what Obama was so busy celebrating, and this is why they went, to the mat to prevent Sherry Honkala and myself from participating in the debates, because they didn't want word getting out that these jobs are not a recovery. These are jobs being created, coming in at half the wages of what these manufacturing jobs used to pay before. So they do not have any semblance of a recovery going on. This is why we're creating jobs, but we have more people on food assistance than ever. They are cutting Medicare and Social Security. They are continuing the Wall Street bailouts, another little known fact. How many people were aware of that? That we continue to bail out Wall Street? A few, but it's not many. They don't talk about it. $85 billion a month. Wall Street banks are continuing to be bailed out. Wow. If we, instead of buying up bad debt of the banks, instead we were buying up the debt of student loans, we would have the student loan debt, it would be over. It would have been over in a year. They've been doing this now. They're well into their second year. So student debt would be gone. That's what democracy looks like. All this nonsense about fiscal cliff sequestration, the White House budget, it's, this is like all the wrong stuff. And they're not fixing it. And then quickly, I'm going to come to how we're going to fix that in a moment, and it's not rocket science. I want to share some of the little key factoids about the climate crisis, because it's important in our conversations with each other. We need to be political therapists. And part of being political therapists is helping people get a grip on what's actually happening, because this information gets suppressed all over the place. But we don't have very long to fix this, and it will really get you up and out of your seat to recognize how really imminent these threats are. So, these are numbers actually from a recent report to the United Nations. Already it's almost 500,000 people a year who are being killed through climate, largely through flooding and drought. And these are largely poor people around the world, but it is coming home to roost here in the US as well. Not so many deaths, but huge economic impacts. And part of that was the storms and the extreme weather events of recent years. In 2011, we broke all records in terms of